Extend and shrink volume in Windows 7. In this video, we will use the built-in disk management utility in order to extend and shrink volumes. In some cases, we need to extend the volume as perhaps we need to meet the prescribed or required partition size. For example, instead of having only 50 gigabytes, we need to have it to be 60 gig. Or the volume is nearing full capacity and we need some temporary solution. We need to perform shrink operation in order to facilitate the reallocation of space to other volumes that need it. But we cannot shrink the volume as much as we need it to be, as there may be unmovable files. Let's begin on how to locate disk management utility on our Windows 7. So we click Start and we type disk management and we choose the create and format partitions. So we click on that and our disk management utility is now open. So as you can see, we have a basic disk with two partitions, C and drive D. Another way in opening our disk management utility is to click Start, click Control Panel, make sure the view by is by category. You go to System and Security. You go down to Administrative Tools and click Create and Format Hard Disk Partitions. And from here you see our disk management utility is now open with the same partitions. We have disk 0 as a basic disk, which is a 50 gig disk and it's online. We have drive C and drive D. So our drive C is 30 gig with an NTFS file system. And let's say if we will want to extend this partition to a higher one, let's say 40 gig or 50 gig, as you can see, we cannot extend the volume when we right click this particular partition. So the reason why is that there is no more free space in our disk 0. In our drive D, we can shrink volume or delete the volume instead. Our drive D is still a raw partition, so chances are there are no contents to it. So by double checking, go to our computer, drive D, and yes, indeed, it is not even formatted yet. So we can close this one and we go back to our disk management utility and we can perform or proceed to delete the volume. So click yes. Now we have an unallocated space. So it is not common that we can simply delete the volume. So in our case, because this is an exercise, we can delete the volume. So now we have free space. Let's see if we can extend the volume. And yes, the extend volume is available. So let's try to click on this one and see if the wizard will launch. And yes, indeed, the wizard will launch, and we'll click next to this one. Alright, so we only need to extend to another 10 gig, for example. So from 30 gig partition, we want it to become 40 gig. So what we can do here is we type 10,240. So 10,240. Okay, so click next. and completing the partition, and there you go, the drive C is extended to a 40 gig partition. So we have a 40 gig drive C partition. So this time we try how to shrink a volume. So we shrink volume. So clicking it, and we'll launch the shrink volume window. So we have a 4960 MB partition. We can only shrink up to 24,909 MB. So what we're trying to do is we shrink this one to a 35 gig. So we need to enter 5,120. So minus 5 gig. So we are shrinking. So we are decreasing the capacity. So this will be the total size after shrink, 35,840. So clicking OK, and hopefully the shrink is completed and the shrink is correct, 35 gig NTFS. So here we go back to a scenario wherein we want to extend our drive C, and this time we have the drive D back and it's formatted, it's not raw, and we try to inspect if there are now contents on drive D, and yes, indeed there are two text files, so we cannot simply delete the volume this time. So this is the realistic scenario we have, wherein we want to try to extend drive C, but the drive D has already files. So when we shrink, yes, we can still shrink some space in order to provide it to C. So let's try again, 10240 like we did a while ago. So we shrink 10 gig and we have a 10 gig unallocated space. So let's try if we can extend the volume. So we have an unallocated space here. However, when you try to right click and extend, you see that the extend volume is grayed out. As long as the unallocated space is not adjacent to the volume that we need to extend, so our built-in disk utility has some limitations about it. So it is possible, but we need to use third-party utilities to perform this operation. So in this extend and shrink volume in Windows 7 video, we have started in how to open the disk management utility, so a built-in utility in Windows 7 in order to extend and shrink volume. So we then proceeded on how to extend the volume. So basically, to extend the volume is to increase the capacity by getting the free space available in our disk. So the assumption is you need to have free space for it to be extended. Also, we have in this video we have done the shrink volume, wherein we can also decrease the space of the volume or the particular partition to a lower number in order for the size to be reallocated to some other volumes. However, we also shown that in realistic scenario wherein when we try to extend a volume and there is no free space available, we need to decide whether we can delete the volume or shrink that volume. However, by shrinking that volume, if the unallocated space is not adjacent to the volume that we need to extend, then the extend volume is not available. Of course, there are possibilities in order to do that. We might use third-party utilities in order to perform the extend. You can also check on the dynamic disk. So however, In this video, we have shown you how to extend and shrink volume in Windows 7, and I hope you learned something about it. Thank you for watching.